Hello and welcome to this ARA webinar with staff from Kincannon Reed. Today's webinar is titled Growing Forward, Ensuring Strong Leadership in Ag Retail. In this webinar, Aaron Locker of Kincannon Reed will discuss talent trends in agriculture and their implications to ag retailers. Aaron will discuss talent challenges facing our industry, as well as what companies are doing to get ahead of them. My name is Hunter Carpenter, Senior Director of Public Policy at ARA, and I'll introduce our webinar speaker in just a bit. But first, I'll go over a few housekeeping items so you know what to expect. Webinars are an important part of the ARA professional development pathway and provide a great opportunity for ARA member companies to help educate their employees. And today's webinar will be recorded and added to the member-only ARA dashboard section of the website. As a reminder, you can log into the dashboard to access past webinars at any time. And if you do not have an ARA login, you can email info@aradc.org to set one up. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. We'll have time for Q&A then. In the meantime, this presentation is going to be more of a conversation between Aaron and myself. You can type your questions into the chat panel at any time. And with that out of the way, I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Aaron Locker. Aaron's a seasoned agribusiness leader and strategist with over 35 years of experience driving growth and innovation across global agricultural markets. His career spans leadership roles at Syngenta, FMC, Vivid Life Sciences, and Helm Agro US, where he advanced both traditional and biological crop solutions. Now, managing director at Kincannon Reed, the only global executive search firm focused on the food and ag value chain, he helps organizations attract and develop transformative leaders. Aaron holds a BS in agricultural economics from The Ohio State University and has completed executive education at Wharton and Harvard Business Schools. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron and let him take it away. Aaron?
Thanks, Hunter. Yeah, thanks, Hunter. I'm happy to be here. And really to talk about such an important topic. And as Hunter said, we kind of set this up as a podcast, since those are big these days. So I've got some visuals to kind of help us guide us through the conversation, and most looking forward to your questions later on. But really the objectives for today's call is how do we prepare not only ag retail, but I think our broader agribusiness community for the leadership challenges, the talent challenges that lie ahead. And so we'll do a little bit of introduction about Kincannon Reed, but then really kind of framing the problems that we have. How did we get here, and what is the changing talent landscape in ag business? And more importantly, I think, especially from an ag retail standpoint, what can we all do differently, more of, as we continue to look for that next generation of leadership in all of our businesses. And then we'll end with a call to action and hopefully go through some of your questions at that time. So who's K&R? As Hunter said, we're actually the largest global executive search and leadership development firm focused solely on food and ag. I've been in the business for 40 years. And 250,000 people in our database, 600 placements since 2019, and we're globally footprint. So we live and breathe this every day, and I would refer to us as an end-to-end shop. So we're most notable for the executive search, but then we also have what we call K&R Edge, which is focused on leadership development services, anything from leadership assessments, executive coaching, and as you can imagine, many discussions around succession planning and how do we build that next generation of talent. So that's why this is such an important topic for us and what we do every day to help our clients in agribusiness find that right talent and develop them from what they have. Next.
So, I just wanted to ask you kind of first how we got here, and what the structural causes of this leadership shortage in agriculture are, and how we can help our members stay ahead of the curve.
That's a great question, Hunter. I mean, I think I always like to start with what's at stake, and first, the cost of poor leadership, and I don't care whether you're a big basic manufacturer or a single outlet retailer. The cost of poor leadership is pretty high. I think we've all probably in our careers seen, the results of that, whether it's missed innovation, operational efficiencies, talent retention. The old adage of people don't leave their company, they leave their boss. And just anytime you have to replace talent, the financial implications of that. So there was a study that was done not too long ago, there at the bottom, just what it cost an organization as much as 7% of their total revenues, with not having the right leader at the top of the ship. And so I think the stakes are high, and we all know, being in this industry for such a long time, anytime that you just have to replace somebody, just think about the missed opportunities, the cost of hiring, onboarding, everything else, getting that new person up to speed. And so the more we can do to not only attract talent, but also develop the talent is going to be critical. But then to your point, Hunter, and the next slide, there's a couple of things that stand out. One, I think globally, from a population standpoint, we're going to set a record this year for the number of people turning 65. And you look at, I show up there kind of the ebbs and flows of the generations. We just finished up Generation Alpha. We just this year actually started Generation Beta, if you can believe it. But I think the notable thing here is really the dip there in Generation X. And as many things, it takes a couple of years before you really start to feel it. I think if you look ag specifically, for every potential leader, between 35 and 50 years old, there are 2 leaders nearing retirement. I saw a quote or a statistic not too long ago. Probably up to 50% of the current senior leadership in agribusiness could be set to retire in the next, 5 to definitely 10 years. And so that's going to leave, a pretty good gap. And you look at the chart there on the bottom right. If you look in agriculture leadership by generations, you can see that, so far we've been able to do, pretty well in terms of, in light of everything, in terms of, having good, solid leaders at the helm. The challenge has been those leaders have been there for the last 20 years. And then you can see after 2025, because of, the boomers really, accelerating into retirement, and even the Generation Xers starting to go there, then we start to taper off. So I think in all the conferences and companies that I talk to, this has become one of the biggest, topics of discussion. And how do I build that bench? I just got done with, last week was the Crop Life and CPDA conference. And what I heard from a lot of business leaders was, we feel pretty good right now with the senior leadership we have. We feel like we have a good bench, but we also feel like there's a gap. Is that bench developed enough that they can jump to the next, leadership level? So that's quite a bit of topic of conversation in the last, last several months. Next. So I spoke earlier this year at the CPDA conference, and in research for that, similar topics, how attracting talent to agriculture is one of our biggest challenges. And I could really go back to the farm crisis, the 80s, as far as really where it started in our business. You look, and I was one of them, growing up on a farm back then. Chances are your family was telling you maybe agriculture is not the best field for you to be in. And that started to cascade into things like, college enrollment and ag universities. I mean, if you look at, the top ag schools like, of course, in addition to the Ohio State University, but also Minnesota, Nebraska, Penn State, between 1980 and 1990 saw a 37% decline in enrollment in ag colleges, while at the same time, the overall enrollment at colleges, grew by 7%. And so I would contend that really that's for agriculture, that's where it started. And then you started to layer things on top of that, the population dynamics that I just went through. And that's what has got us kind of staring at a pinch point, if you will, right now.
What trends are you seeing in the ag job market versus competing industries like tech and finance and others?
Yeah, I think if you look at some of the statistics, today, I think overall, agribusiness job openings are growing at about a 3% per year growth rate, while tech and finance industries are growing by double digits. And so there's a level of, I think, as people come out of colleges, there's a level of attraction, more so into tech and finance and other industries. And so I think part of our challenge, part of the trends have been, one of messaging. You think about it, ag retail, it's a mission driven, tech enabled, but too often, we're seen as kind of old school. And so really to close that gap, we'll need to do better storytelling, leadership development, and really you'll hear me talk a lot about our employee value proposition. How are we attracting that talent, and what's our story? And why should young people coming out of college be looking at agriculture and especially ag retail, as a purpose-driven career that they want to get involved in?
You've talked a little bit about poor leadership and how that can cost companies, in some instances, millions of dollars. And can you break that down for us in sort of an ag retail context and what you've seen?
Yeah, I think, from an ag retail, to me, it gets even more critical. I mentioned the statistic earlier on about, up to 7% of total revenues. And that's for, say, larger companies that may have, benches established, can do a decent job of, and having a wealth of different roles that they can move people in and around as they develop them. As we all know, ag retail, doesn't have as many of those layers, those multiple functions. And so it becomes critical that we're really focusing on the individual in order to limit the exposure to, them moving on to other industries. I think also in ag retail, we've seen in some cases, I've seen it personally, basically whole teams can come and pull up the stakes and move to another location. And when you peel that onion back, I think a lot of it comes down to them not seeing, the pathway to, either their careers or where the company was going. So I think it's very, and you'll hear me talk a lot about this, it's very important that as ag retail is now that we're kind of 2 years, 3 years removed from COVID, back to stability, looking to the future, you're really setting their own strategic plans, if you will, and then having the discussion around, what does our talent need to look like, and how are we developing that talent? Because again, the cost is even higher at ag retail.
What are some of the risks of not having a clear succession plan in place, especially for ag retailers?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hunter. I mean, I think, a lot of the companies that we work with, and I get this from industry reports as well, you'd be surprised to know that maybe, as many as only about 30% of the companies have clear succession plans. And many of us, and when I was growing up in the industry, you'd have your basics, like the what I would refer to as if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, who would take my job? And the not having that succession planning, what that inhibits people from doing is really focusing on the other questions that come out of that. Not only who do I have that takes over the senior leader roles, but then the next most important question, which is, how am I developing those people? What experiences are I giving to those people so that they are ready to step into those roles? And so succession planning quickly becomes a development discussion, and looking at the talent pool of ag retail and saying, I really have some people that have the skill sets to really assume leadership roles, but do they have the experiences? And then putting a plan in there, because that's why I see too often, companies, they have their strategic plan, they come out of there and they say, I know where I want to go, I know what I got to do to get there, and then they stop. And I always coach them. I said, you need to have that talent discussion to say, okay, what type of skill set am I going to need to get me there to realize this plan? And can I develop it from within? Do I have to go out and attract from the outside? Because as we all know, agriculture is constantly changing. AI, name the technology, and it's only going to get more accelerated. And so having that domain experience is going to be critical going forward.
Speaking of skill sets, what are the most important leadership traits for ag retailers, and how have we seen that evolve over time, and how is it evolving right now?
Well, if you want to go to the next slide, you'd asked about, trends and I think, I mentioned a few of these. I mean, talking about succession planning, workforce planning, I think we're going to need to be more adept at acquiring talent from the outside. That gets back into that employee value proposition and the agriculture message. But what I coach companies on is once they have that plan established and they say, okay, maybe I need to go out and hire somebody because I have some retirements happening in the leadership team. Get your plan set and be ready to execute it, because I've seen too many times where you have candidates identified and they're interested in coming to work for companies, but then there's delay, and so you really need to be able to make those decisions and get that right talent as fast as you can. Um, you know, the employee development, like as I said before, is kind of fragmented. I think companies are generally getting better because they see now the trends that I showed, but they're trying to feel their way out. So that's why, we get involved with a lot of companies on a K&R Edge, standpoint. I think if you look on from a candidate side, they're being much more, you can call it generation, but much more selective and risk averse. I think some of that has to do with COVID as well, right? It's been a lot of upheaval over the last couple of years coming out of COVID. And so that's made candidates a lot more risk averse, flexibility, especially in terms of being able to move, for a job, continues to get, pressure. I saw statistics between 2021, so pre-COVID, through 2023. The percentage of people willing to relocate for jobs dropped by about 73%. Now that's since come back a little bit, but I still think you have that flexibility that candidates are looking for. And then, but I think the thing that we have in our favor as an ag community is that purpose and values driven choices. Because it can't get much better from a purpose of feeding the world and the values that we all have in the agricultural community. That should be one of the keys to our employee value proposition. But next slide. So you'd asked about, the traits that matter. And we're members of the AESC, the Association for Executive Search Consultants. It's a global firm, and they do a lot of good work in terms of surveys of companies across the globe. And the last survey that they did was that question: what are the three most critical things that a leader of today needs to have? And emotional intelligence rose to the top. It's always been there, but I think over the last several years, it's really risen to the top. And I'll dive into that a little bit on the next slide. And then the other things that you would imagine, results driven execution, and then also dealing with ambiguity, which definitely taught us that coming out of COVID. So those are the three main things that I think from a leadership traits that everybody's really looking for. So let's dive into emotional intelligence. You might hear a lot about this. What I find, there's a lot of questions, maybe misconceptions about what it actually is, right? So I wanted to take a little bit of time, not only talk about emotional intelligence, but then the EI, but the EQ, or the measurement. How do you know if you're advancing your emotional intelligence? And it's things like self-awareness. I joke, our teams are kind of like horses. They can sense when we're having a bad day, right? And some of us wear that on our sleeves more than others. And so I think to be able to have that self-awareness and to use and ask for feedback about strengths and weaknesses is critical. Prioritizing and understanding team members' perspectives and fostering collaboration is another key. Well, I used to manage the strategic account group for FMC. And I would invariably have, one of the account reps come in. wanting me to solve a problem for them. And but it kind of got to be, a thing that we did, which is they knew when they asked, they said, "Hey, we got this problem I'd like for you to solve." I would hit them with 5 or 6 questions. One, because I need to understand what the situation is, right? And then two, because I want the conversation, I want the collaboration, and ultimately I want them to make a recommendation on what place and what direction that they want to go. So the other thing, be rewarding, cultivate that trust, positive interaction, control reactions, which is sometimes difficult to do in the heat of the battle. And then practice in humility. Balancing that confidence, which everybody wants to see in their senior leaders, but that openness to feedback. As I look, and we all do, we've had leaders that we work for that were like, boy, if I ever get in that position, that's what I want to do. And one of those things, for me, are those leaders that probably asked as much feedback as what they gave you, right? You get into those review times and your performance reviews, and as an employee, what can I do better? But then the really good ones are the one, how can I help you more? And so I think that's another way of really um, growing your emotional intelligence, because I think, and again, you can call it a generational thing. You can call it just with everything people have been through, coming out of COVID. The reason why that's risen to the top is because, unlike when I started in the industry, came right out of college and you wanted to work for a company. Didn't matter who it was, right? Now as I talk to candidates, they're wanting to work um, for a vision, a purpose, in some cases, a person that they respect. And so it's really changed in terms of what people are looking for. Next. And along with that, or combined with that, is this whole notion about resilient leadership. Again, coming out of COVID, that taught us a lot, is those leaders that could be resilient in the face of dynamic change. Because let's face it, agriculture, like many businesses, there's a lot of uncertainty, climate shifts, supply chain disruptions, and as I mentioned before, evolving technology demands. All of them require strong, resilient leaders, leaders that can adapt quickly, maintain their composure, i.e. emotional intelligence, foster that productivity. And I think the most important is encouraging learning from setbacks, because that's really where you truly learn. Is you can probably, everybody has their favorite quote, on you never learn unless you've failed at least a couple of times, right? And to have that culture of trying new things, but then if some of them don't work out, we learn a lot and we change and we adapt and we go forward. That all goes into that resilient leadership, and that's really the basis of a culture that I think all of us are striving to get in our individual companies.
What is it that ag retailers can do today to start attracting better talent?
Okay, go to the next slide. Actually, I think I got that teed up. I think a couple of things that I would focus in on first of all, and that is we all have existing teams, right? And all of you have been successful in your local geographies. And the first and foremost is really investing in that leadership development. It's much more cost effective, obviously, to develop from within than to try to attract, from the outside. Sometimes because of again, readiness, could be skill sets, could be just the way the business, the dynamics are changing. We do need to go on the outside, and sometimes, and a lot of times that's healthy, to get unique perspectives in. But I would say, invest in your leadership development, training, mentorship, skill building. And again, I always go back to your North Star should be, what's that strategic plan that you just got done putting together? And then ask yourself, what's the skill sets that my organization is going to need to be able to realize that? And then that will dictate what you do to develop your bench, and so on. I think the other couple of things, expanding the talent search. And again, this gets back into that employee value proposition. How are you going to be attracting folks? Let's take technology, that you really need that domain experience. As See and Spray and other technologies continue to evolve, you're going to need to attract that. And so why should they become to work for, for ag? And to be able to talk through technology and really the limitless possibilities that technology and agriculture brings. Um, and I mentioned enhancing the employer branding. Really spend a lot of time on your employee value proposition. What's your elevator speech, if you will? And so when even if you see somebody at church and you're like, hey, love to have you come out and you're going to be graduating soon. Love to have a conversation. Um, you know, Practice that because you get that one shot to really attract them to say, wow, that really does sound like a really purpose driven, value driven career that I would be interested in. And then lastly, the succession planning. I think again, going back to my earlier example of those companies that have senior leaders, but their bench, while good, is probably about 2 to 3 years away from really being able to ascend into those senior leadership roles. So succession planning and what you do with that, it's got to be key.
I want to unpack the employer branding piece a little bit. Well, how do we shift perceptions of ag retail as a career choice?
I think one of the things that I'll give you an example. So I had the I guess the opportunity earlier this year to testify in front of a Senate committee about agriculture, and 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 it was myself. It was Zippy Duvall, who was the president of American Farm Bureau, a large grower from Florida, and then an economist from Cornell. And my point to the senators, and this is all about, what can, Congress do, aside from passing a farm bill, which I pointed that out.
Here,
But
here.
what can Congress bill do to help, attract more people to agriculture? And what I shared with them was, there's no other um, there's no other sector that I can think of really that blends health, nutrition, energy, and technology like agriculture. And I mean, we've proven we can grow the safest, most abundant food supply on the face of the earth, but it's not going to happen unless we have, for the future, unless we have the leaders to be able to do it. And so I think again, as I look at ag retail, it's that story. It's what's our story to attract those folks into agriculture, and especially into rural communities. We've spent a generation wanting to move into the cities. Now I think there's even a shift of being open to move back into rural communities, but we need to show them a pathway and what our industry brings and offers, not only from a nobility standpoint of feeding the world, but then also it's the technology, it's the nutrition, it's the energy, it's a lot of things that we just don't get a lot of credit for, but we all need to tell that story.
How can companies in our space, in ag retail, strengthen their own leadership development pipelines, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I think going back to what I'd said before, I think we start with um, leadership team assessments. I think well, actually, you start with what is your plan? Where's your growth aspirations? How are you going to get there? What's the skill set that you need? Then what I see many companies do is they develop their talent plan. That starts with, okay, let's just have a really robust review of our current talent and where do we feel like we can build and grow, where do we feel like we have gaps, and then that leads into your succession planning. I found many companies, sometimes I find companies maybe get a little bit of angst when approaching their teams to say, hey, we're going to do an assessment, we're going to check where we're at, stuff like that. But what I found is what that shows the employees is I really want to get serious about growing this business. And I want to, at the same time, get serious about growing each of you. And here's some of the things that we're going to be doing from a leadership development standpoint to really, provide pathways for you that want to move up in the organization, but then also help you develop your skill sets for the agriculture of tomorrow. And I think that's a pretty powerful message to employees that like, wow, it's focused because we've all been through those, what I would call events, right? Some leadership event that was a lot of great information, but then everybody leaves there without any follow-up and it dies on the vine. Making it part of a process that's continually revisited and kept front and center, I think is very powerful to ag retail employees.
And do you think the next generation of ag leaders is already here in the pipeline, or do we need to go out and find them?
I say yes. I think, like I said, I think there's many that have gotten into agriculture and love it, and that's the only thing that they can see themselves doing. And so I think they're here. Our challenge is because of, as I mentioned way in the early, because of the rapid decrease or a rapid increase, I should say, in retirements. It's going to accelerate that developing from within and attracting. And I think that's where the attracting is really going to be key, I think, between over the next 5 years. Now, having said that, you got to do it differently. You can't just attract somebody. There was a story that somebody told me about a family-owned grain firm up in the upper Midwest that been in the family for 3 generations. When the CEO decided to retire, they thought, well, they'd get some new insight, they'd attract from outside ag industry. And what they found was after, less than 3 years, they started losing customers, they started losing people. And it's just only because, not that this wasn't a smart person, this was a Harvard, educated individual, but they didn't understand ag. And they didn't understand the cyclicality of ag and the relationships you need to establish and everything like that. And so my point is that yes, we will need to attract from outside of ag, no question about it. But we need to think about it differently, and we need to spend more time on what I would call the onboarding as we're attracting that unique talent, that skill set that we need. Don't just expect that since, hey, this is a smart person, maybe I have an ag tech role that I need to fill, so I'm getting somebody from Microsoft and that should solve all my problems. No, you're going to need to take the extra step and really bring that person along through proper onboarding to get them acclimated to agriculture, because it is so different than any other industry.
If you could give one piece of advice to the ag retail executives on the call today, what would it be?
I think go to the next slide, and I'll break it into kind of short, medium, long term. Um, I think first of all, it's, speeding up the decision making, have your plans, understand how you want to, execute on those plans and be ready to execute, especially when talent's involved. Sharpen that EVP. I can't mention that, enough. Really have your elevator speech down and have it ready to go, whether, again, like I said, whether you're at church or whether you're at an industry event. You should always be looking for, for talent and trying to attract them into your organizations, and then identifying your leadership gaps, aligned with your strategic plan. I think medium term, then once you get your house in order, let's say you got your strategic plan, you kind of looked at your own team and the skill sets that you're going to need to be able to realize that plan. Now really focus on, how do I develop the talent from within and build those succession plans. And because the succession plans in and of themselves, if you run them right, will dictate, that they need to be acted on, all the way throughout the year, as opposed to what many times happens is, hey, we see you as a high potential, and so we're going to move you up in the organization, and then you don't talk about it until next year's annual review. This is a more intentional way of moving them into different career settings. Maybe it's through projects, maybe it's different positions as a way to build them for the future. And then long term, again, position ag retail as a magnet for those diverse interests from food to technology. And then lead in shaping the next generation of leadership. I think those are the key things, the major implications for ag retail, and I would contend agribusiness in general.
What gives you hope about the future of leadership in agriculture?
You know, I think the biggest thing, and again, I go back to my message to the Senate. There really is no industry that combines all of this, and we're the best in some cases, many cases. Too often are we the best kept secret in the room. And it's just a perception thing, that many people still, they know they get milk from the grocery store versus a cow, right? So, I think it's incumbent upon um, not only all of us and obviously great associations like ARA, CropLife, CPDA, folks like that do a fantastic job of educating the legislators about our issues, but just us as a whole, continuing to tell that story and do it in a more futuristic manner. And what I mean by that is, um, kind of look outwards and start to paint the picture of where agriculture is leading to. I think that's what's going to attract more people to agriculture in the future. So that's what gives me hope. That it's the other thing is just like I said, and I always tell people when I'm even speaking at colleges to different organizations, you will never find a better group, a more genuine group of people than agriculture. And that's not to say a bad word about any other industries, but I mean we've all lived it, we felt it. Salt of the earth people, and willing to do anything for you. And I think with the generations beta and alpha, that's what they're looking for. We just need to go out and find them.
Hmm. Well, I wanted to make sure to pull up your call to action about why this matters.
Yeah, I think, and like I said, I won't belabor the point, but really focus on that building and investing in that resilient, emotionally intelligent leadership is going to be critical. And I think having that type of leader will then dictate the type of culture that your company has and will make your attraction of talent, of future talent, that much easier, I think, going forward. It starts at the top. And because we're going to need these leaders that are highly adaptable, composed, emotionally aware, and really willing to learn from setbacks going forward.
Great. Thanks, Aaron.
Mhm.
Do have a few questions that have already come through.
Okay.
So we'll move to the questions. Go ahead and throw your contact information up on the screen. And the first question is, what is our role as alumni of our various colleges to help them understand what we need versus what they prioritize and teach?
I'll give you a personal example. So, when I was living in Columbus, I would go in and speak to the ag colleges, the organizations, the ag clubs and things like that. And again, this is my way of giving back. But then also, I was always amazed at the questions, that they would have. Um, their questions were more around, okay, I've seen you do different things in your career. How did you make the decisions? Where did you go? And stuff like that. And I think focused on real world, and I think maybe this is where your question was getting. Uh, I think it won't get political here, but I think, yeah, I sense that the question is around, we're probably teaching, students not enough of what they really need to be able to survive, in the world, and much less, how do I navigate a career? And again, why should ag be one of those selections? And so I think as alumni, if you haven't, um, definitely reach out and get back with your colleges. What I found is any alumni that gets back to the ag college, or heck, even try the other colleges within your universities, um, to be able to have that conversation about, especially people that have been in industry for a while, and what are the choices that they made? How did they get there? How did they make those? You really see these college students learn a lot from those type of discussions.
Great. Next question. What agricultural leadership programs are available for the industry, such as ARA's Rising Stars or Leadership at its Best, for ag retailers to utilize, including things like Agriculture Future of America and other programs like that?
Yeah, and Hunter, I could probably use some help on this because yeah, you're right. That's the good thing about our industry associations. I think about all of them have some level of leadership training, where they bring folks from the industry, maybe early to mid career folks from the industry, and talk to them about some of the things I talked about today. And I think those skills are needed, and I would encourage all of you, if you haven't taken advantage of them, you should. The only thing that I would caution, or I would emphasize, if you will, make it a part of your overall plan. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, we've all been through in our careers many of those events, that were great information. But then you get back to your day job and you find yourself not utilizing, as well as you could have. And where I've seen companies really excel is they have their development, plan in place. Some of these initiatives with ARA, AFA, things like that, fit into that nicely. But what employees are really wanting to see is a long-term focus, right? Otherwise, it's like we did that this year, and then, whatever happened, what's next, or how do I? Because the whole thing, especially what your younger leaders are looking for, they're looking for that pathway. How do I develop if I want to go up in the organization, or how do I develop the skill sets that keeps me energized and motivated? That's a process and not an event.
Yeah, no, Aaron, I think you make a great point. I think asking folks to take advantage of programs that are available, even if you don't think a certain employee is ready, that's what these programs are for, right? It's to develop your younger employees. I think you learn a lot about your employees. They learn a lot about themselves through a program like Leadership at its Best or Becoming a Rising Star through ARA. Opens up new opportunities for them down the road. So I would just encourage ARA members to take advantage of things like that. Obviously, you can still get in Rising Stars, folks, for ARA and for our conference coming up in December in Salt Lake City. Great way to talk to you as well. So engage with Kincannon Reed and folks like this that can help you in your search for talent.
Yeah.
Another question, how can a company help train leadership traits, including having key employees get actively involved in national associations or state associations for that matter, gain experience, be an industry advocate, etc.?
So let me say that back to you. So how can companies say that
How,
again? The
how,
first.
how can companies help train leadership traits by
Oh, okay.
encouraging employees, young employees, to get involved and engage in advocacy?
Yeah, to me it's more of a culture. And if you want to, and you should, have that culture of involvement, then it becomes the norm, right? And that way, then when you say, okay, as part of we as ag retail, we want to be involved. We want to be involved in ARA, but we want to be involved in many other associations that directly impact agriculture. Then it makes it that much more, that much less of a step, if you will, for you to say, and I'd like you to be involved in MACA, or I'd like you to be involved in ARA, or I'd like you to come along with me to this year's ASTA conference, or things like that.
Mm.
Um, and I always tell companies, if you're gonna join an organization, join with the intent of being involved. It's one thing just to show up to a conference, but you just learn so much more from the interaction,
Yeah.
if you're involved, whether it's involved on a committee or things like that. I think that's so beneficial for everybody, and I applaud companies for doing that, because again, in my mind, it feeds into that value proposition of we're not just ag retail, out in Ohio. Uh, we participate in the broader agricultural industry by getting involved.
I have a couple more questions if you have time.
Yeah.
We've lost a couple of strong candidates to other industries. What can we do to make ag retail more competitive in attracting top tier talent?
Yeah, the one thing, that's a great question. sometimes it's a shiny penny. I can't tell you how many people. So I grew up in the crop protection industry, and how many people that I had worked with that thought maybe jumping over to pharmaceuticals, the shiny penny is the way to go, only to find out usually about 2 years later they would come back to agriculture. Um, yeah, I say that is because getting on the front side of it, and the first thing, if I were to lose somebody to another industry, I'd want to learn from that. Number one, what led you to that decision? You can learn a lot on, I didn't see my career path. Was it as I didn't feel challenged enough? I felt like I could do more. So, always having that, there's value in that debrief, session, and then challenge yourself on, okay, taking that and really getting that to the point where you can do something with it. And what do we do internally to change? The other thing too is, I say, the more you invest, and I sound like a broken record, I know, but again, the more you invest in development, the less you have to worry about leaving for another industry. Because again, people, if they feel like they're being developed, if they feel like they're being invested in, then they want to stay because they want to see where that goes.
Hmm.
It's where the development is event driven or gets kind of lost in the shuffle of the day to day. Then you have people starting to think, wow, is this where I want to be? And so I can't stress it enough, that leadership development and showing them your investment in that is critical.
This next question kind of speaks to that, actually. What's the one investment in people you think every ag retailer should be making right now, even if budgets are tight?
Yeah, I would, again, I think it's that leadership development, but more on a personal, level. And that starts with, what type of assessment tools, do you use? What type of, like say in our case, maybe it would be good to have a third party like, K&R Edge, collaborate with you and really get to understand, what's your strategy, and talk to me about your people, and then let's identify and collaborate together. Where are our gaps and where does this lead us to? And let's build a plan for that, as opposed to just a broad stroke that we hope fits everybody. Because the more you can personalize it, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah. No, that's good. There are lots of tools that ARA offers our member companies through our leadership development pathway that folks can take advantage of and wish more people would take advantage of. So that's right in line with what you're talking about. If you're
Well,
a member of an association, take advantage of the things they offer.
yeah, and the other thing I mentioned on that, Hunter, is it's really a way to get people out of their box,
Yeah.
right? And it doesn't matter whether you're a sales rep for Syngenta or you're working at ag retail or whatever else. We get in our own little world, right? And just to be able to have that nudge and say, hey, I'd like for you to go to this meeting or something like that. And for many people, especially younger people that haven't been involved in that or done that a lot, it's going to be a little scary. But more often than not, what you'll find is they come back appreciative that you pushed them in that direction. And, but then having the conversation about what they learned, and then how can we apply those learnings to our business? And maybe it leads to, hey, here's somebody that we need to talk to because of your question on, some sort of ag technology. The networking and just getting out of your box is critical, especially early on in your career development.
This next question, hopefully, maybe will help you think of a cautionary tale that you can share with the group. What's the most common reason for a company to be non-committal or drag their feet when developing leaders or putting together a succession plan?
I would say it would be, how do I want to put that? Um, the kind of like the day job gets in the way. I think as leaders across agribusiness and probably everywhere, you always think about, I need to focus more on my people. I need to develop my people. I need to do all this around development. Um, and but then the daily grind gets in the way,
Yeah.
or the fire of the day gets in the way. And two things I would say to that. One is you really got to be, if there's one goal you can set for yourself is to be disciplined, not treat those performance reviews as a once a year deal. And I would contend, don't even do it it's great that people do it now kind of more on the quarters at least. But even more, it's that feedback loop back and forth all the way through.
Yeah.
The other thing that, and this was back when I was with FMC, uh, one of the things that I learned and I thought what really worked out well is it was the first time that when I was on the leadership team, we had our HR professional, our head of HR, in every business discussion. Before that, I didn't really see that a lot. And, initially I kind of questioned why, but then it made perfect sense because, your HR team should be part of your business, your executive team, which they are, but of your executive meetings and your business meetings and your strategic plans. Because like I said, I think that's where a lot of companies miss the boat when they don't take that next step after strategic planning to say, now what's the skill set? And that's where your HR folks can be so beneficial because now they really do understand what's that skill set that we are going to need and how we develop it from within, or who do we go out to help us attract that.
Yeah, well, look, I think this has been a timely, a necessary discussion for our members to have. Aaron, I want to thank you for being on today. I want to thank Kincannon Reed for sharing their time, your resources with ARA and our members. We spoke earlier, and I gave a little plug for our conference in Salt Lake City, December 2nd through the 4th. Make sure you register. Early bird closes October 15th, so get in before that date so you can get a cheaper registration, a less expensive registration, I'll say, because we want you there. If you're a member of ARA, we want you to take advantage of every opportunity you have to meet with colleagues and industry professionals and network, but also come by and talk to other members about um, what they've done and share information. I think one of the greatest things that isn't talked about being a member of ARA is the lessons you can learn from other companies so that you don't have to go through the same pain points that they do or have. So I again want to extend a thanks to Aaron and Kincannon Reed for all you've done today, and maybe leave you one little window in case you want to share anything else as closing thoughts.
Well, first I'd say I plan to be there, Hunter. So look me up.
Great.
Everybody, love to meet, a lot more of you, out there in Salt Lake City. And again, I just appreciate the time. I think this is my 36th year in agriculture after growing up on a family farm in Ohio. And we all seen dynamic change, and we've seen the ebbs and the flows and challenges and everything else. But I think we're all farmers at heart, and so we're innately resilient. But so I'm blessed to have the role that I am now, working with companies to help them develop, the next generation of leaders, as well as attracting the next generation of leaders. So again, I can't thank you enough about the time, and wishing everybody all a safe harvest, and looking forward to seeing all of you out in Salt Lake City.
Thanks again, Aaron. This hopefully will not be the last conversation we have with Aaron and the team at Kincannon Reed. We want to build on this today's interview and podcast format. Maybe we can do this again soon and help pare this down to specific webinars about one topic at a time, and maybe help grow this into a longer series of webinars. So thanks again for all you do.
Yeah, thanks.